Please comment where you are watching in the world. So Jane and I recently got in touch on MySpace. We knew of each other in high school, but were never really friends. I hosted a party not long after our MySpace encounter, and she came by for a while. I thought she looked really good, and we talked and bit, and had a nice time. I ended asking her to dinner a couple times afterwards. The first time she said yes and backed out. The second time she said maybe because of blah blah blah, but I never heard from her. So I chalked it up and forgot about her. I got a message from her months later apologizing and telling me that she was dealing with some stuff from an ex and had met some new people. But that was done and she would like to still be invited to all my BBQs this summer. This is something about which we spoke at the party. I didn't get back to her right away, but eventually I accepted her apology and told her she was on the list. She responded by saying that she would love to see me again, and blah blah blah. Fast forward a week or so, and I get the opportunity to go to a fancy dinner party at a museum through work. They want to fill up a prepaid table, and my boss says they'll rent me a tux. So I start looking for a date, and Jane gets back to me and says she'd like to go. Hooray! The evening arrives, and I am all decked out in a tuxedo as I go to pick her up. She looks fabulous in a strapless black evening gown. She had recently dyed her hair black, too. It looked really good. When we enter the car, we start chatting a bit and catching up. Early on in the conversation, she apologizes if she is a little down because one of her co-workers was in the hospital, where she works as a lab tech, after being shot in the head by her husband in an attempted murder-suicide. I was of course flabbergasted. I told her we could of course cancel if she was too upset, but she said that she would be fine. I now think that she just made this up. Why do you ask? By the end of the story you'll agree that she doesn't need a reason. So we get to the museum, and we are probably the youngest people there. We valet the car and check our coats and head up to the bar, which is quite busy because everyone is being herded into the same area. As we wait for our first drink, she makes a negative comment about a fruity perfume that she considers foul. Out loud, in a conversational voice, she states, "What is the awful fruity smell? I think it might be her," referring to the woman standing right next to her, well within earshot. The woman obviously hears her and walks away. Jane comments that she thinks the woman heard her, but without an ounce of embarrassment or regret. I try and play it off, but I am very uncomfortable. We get our drinks, mingle, and after a while proceed down to dinner. At the dinner table we sat next to a co-worker and his wife, who happened to be a teacher. Teacher and Jane chatted a bit, and the conversation quickly moved to teaching and related stories and blah blah blah. Following this exchange, Jane turns to me and asks, "Why is it that teachers think everyone cares about their job? They all seem to think what they do is so amazing," etc. After inquiring today, it seems that the teacher wife didn't actually hear her say that, thank God. But it was definitely loud enough that I thought she might have. I was very embarrassed, but again tried to move the conversation towards a more reasonable tone and downplay how rude her comment had been. She also made a couple of snide comments during the speeches, to which we were forced to listen after we finished eating. I was pretty sure by this point that I was not going to call her again. But things got better. After the speeches, we went around the museum with our drinks and played around with all the exhibits, and caught the latter half of an IMAX show about the moon landing. As the evening drew to a close, the event ended at 11:30. We decided to go to Hip Bar downtown. We arrived at the bar after getting a little lost, which in a silly first date kind of way wasn't unpleasant, and proceeded up to the top to get a drink. The bar was packed, but we found an open table. We and another small group converged on the table at the same time, however, so we shared it with 3 chicks. They were nice enough, and we talked briefly with them while carrying on our own conversation. Eventually she began another chapter of our conversation with, "Jim, I'm a mess and you don't want anything to do with me." I wouldn't fully appreciate the truth and accuracy of this statement until much later. After she said this, she got into how very recently she went without alcohol for 6 months because she was an alcoholic. She then proceeded to show me a scar on her leg. I asked her if she got it falling down from being drunk. She said no. Then I asked her if she did it to herself, and she said yes. She told me about how she used to cut herself all the time, and on numerous occasions she had to get stitches because of it. She also told me that she was getting better and that she hadn't cut herself in 7 months. Now the evening had been going great since the aforementioned rude behavior, and I had been drinking, so the warning sirens in my head didn't go off nearly as loudly as they should have. The evening continued. 2 a.m. was fast approaching, and Jane decided she wanted to do one more shot. I tell her I have to drive, but since she insists on doing one with or without me, I join her. At the bar we bumped into someone whom she apparently met on a trip to the bathroom, and he invited us to some after-hours thing. She is all about it. The guy gives us terrible directions, which I don't mind because I'm not sure I want to go. As I go get the car from the valet, I see this guy's arm around her as she is talking to him and his friend, and I don't particularly like that. So when she comes to the car, I tell her that I'd prefer to go home, and if she wanted to go to the after-hours thing, she should go with those guys. She gets a little upset and apologizes and asks me, "Will you please come? I am having fun, and I want you to come." This continues for a bit, and I finally relent. It turns out that the directions we got were good, and had no trouble finding the place. I let her out OT use the restroom, and try to find a place to park. This turns out to be rather difficult. There are cars lining the street and filling the parking lot despite the fact that we are in the middle of an industrial district at 7 Mile and Mound, Detroit. I park entirely too far away for comfort and meet up with her in the parking lot. I tell her about my reservations about the neighborhood and the location of the car, but she really wants to go and says I can now park in the lot. This is true, since in the couple minutes it took me to park, some spaces had opened up. She eventually convinces me to go get the car, and even volunteers to stand in the space in order to guard it. Before I get to the space, some 1980s conversion van decides to take the space, and Jane is having none of it. With the van hanging halfway out of the space, they begin to argue. Loudly. As many spots had opened up, I took another perfectly close and reasonably safe space, and then I have to try and get her to calm her ass down. Eventually she gives up, but as she leaves the space, she punches the guy's van. Now he is pissed off, so he starts yelling at her about the punch, and she is yelling at him about the parking space. He must realize that she is bats-hit crazy, because he decides he doesn't want to throw down with her, a feeling she most definitely does not share, and tries to walk away. Jane of course gets in the guy's face, and will not let him pass. I finally physically remove her from his path, and she calls him a fucking pussy as he walks inside. Wow. We are warned not to enter the bar. So now I have to get her home, but she refuses to go into the car, opting instead for the ever-popular, walk myself home 10 miles through the ghetto in the middle of the night wearing an evening gown option. I try to make it clear to her that there is no way I will allow this to happen, and try to coax her back to the car. It's not working. Next thing, the van guy comes out again, but this time he is trying to resolve the situation. He asks me if I will switch parking spaces with him to make her happy. I thank him, but say I'm just trying to get her home. Eventually I agree since she will not get into the car anyway, and I'm not going to leave her there, but when we begin the transfer she announces that all is well, and we should all go inside. And so we do. It turns out that this is most definitely a gay bar. But it's not crazy whips and chains gay, and they are still serving drinks, until 5 a.m., and we see the folks we met at Centaur inside. I get us some drinks, I make sure hers is extra weak, and we start dancing. She tells me that she is sorry if I was scared in the parking lot, which I was a bit, and that she wouldn't make me fight the van guy, she would do it herself. Unfortunately for me, she said this while dancing sexily in front of me, so while I said that was nuts, and that's not how I operate, we continue to dance, begin to have an okay time. This okay times gets a little better when she begins to pull in proximate lesbians to our dancing. At the risk of sounding like a cliché, I find this to be a perfectly reasonable and positive turn of events. It gets less positive when I am no longer being danced with. Isn't this also a cliché? I decide to temporarily leave her to her ladies and go check this place out. I find our Centaur compatriots again and talk a bit with them. I also talk to some folks that are inquiring about the relationship status between myself and my drunk date. I cannot tell them quickly enough that this is our first date. She is not my girlfriend. Jane seems to getting spacier and spacier as she starts grabbing unmentionable regions on the ladies with whom she is dancing. I speak with one gal in particular who seems really nice, and she actually helps me out at one point with Jane. Turns out that this gay bar has periodic performances by lip-syncing crossdressers, performances during which everyone is required to leave the small dance floor. I'd never seen anything like it before, and I found it to be rather amusing actually. If you've never seen a 6 feet, 275-pound black guy in a dress mouth the words to "Enough is enough," you haven't really lived. Apparently Jane does not think that this dance floor requirement applies to her, and she continues to dance. Then she is removed by who I am later told is the owner of the bar. Apparently, he had warned her numerous times. I grab her, and with the help of my new friend Christine, the hot lesbian, keep her off the stage. Of course, Jane is not about to let the owner of the bar tell her what to do, so she proceeds to slap the guy in the back of the head as he walks away. When I ask her about this a few minutes later, she tells me it was a joke. The owner did not find it funny. He grabbed her arm and threatened to throw her out of the bar hard. I remove her arm from his grip as I apologize and falsely assure him it was an accident. How fun! After the performance, she returns to the dance floor and starts dancing with every chick out there. After she is done with that, she starts randomly latching onto girls sitting at the bar. She seems to take a liking to one in particular and won't let her go. This girl seems to enjoy the craziness for a while, but eventually it becomes clear that Jane won't let her go. One of her lesbian friends, either a girlfriend or a wannabe girlfriend, starts to get a little upset. I see this and try to get Jane to release and come and dance with me, but she won't. So I shrug my shoulders to the upset lesbians and sit at the bar and just watch. Jane and her new girl go and dance, and Jane is running interference against the upset lesbian, i.e. Jane won't let her dance with anyone else. Now the upset lesbian is turning into the angry lesbian. After the dancing, Jane and company sit back down. Together. From all indications, Jane is the only one happy about it. So 5 a.m. rolls around, and Jane is still connected to her new friend. At one point, at the urging of the lesbian gaggle, I wrap my arms around her waist and physically remove her from her friend. She immediately returns. Everyone is told that it is time to leave, so I try to hand Jane her coat, purse, and shoes. I am ignored. I try again to remove her and am unsuccessful. In frustration, I throw her stuff on a chair and go out to the car. I never make it there, however, because I start to feel bad. I am worried about what is going to happen to her, since everyone knows she is nuts and doesn't want anything to do with her. So I go back in long enough to hand Jane her coat and purse, but get left with her fucking shoes, and we leave the bar. In the parking lot, she still will not relent, and is now near tears and begging her new friend to take her home with her. While I stand right there, her new friend repeatedly declines. Somehow they are eventually separated. I hand Jane her shoes, and we walk to the car. I told her I would drive the car to her since she wasn't wearing shoes. I was ignored, and she walked through an ankle-deep puddle. We drove back to her apartment in complete silence, and without so much as my looking in her general direction. I wasn't even really angry. The situation was so messed up that I couldn't believe it had even happened. As we arrived at her apartment building, there were still no words from either of us. I stopped in front of her door, and she didn't get out. I told her that I would walk her to the door. When I open the door for her, she won't leave the car. We have a conversation that consists of her inquiring as to my reasons for being upset. I tell her that I am not mad nor even embarrassed, but that she should be. I told her that no one in that bar wanted anything to do with her by night's end, and that she really needed to get her shit together. I say this as nicely and delicately as I can. After this, she gets out of the car, and I walk her to the door. At the door of her building, I tell her that I had a really nice time for about 70% of the evening, and I tell her good night. But she isn't talking. She is just staring at me now. The stares are not creepy vacant zombie stares, but she is looking at me like she wants to me say or do something. Are you not even going to say goodbye to me? I ask. I get no response. I start asking her what she wanted, and try to get her to talk. But she won't. A couple times she gets out her keys like she is going inside, but doesn't. She just isn't talking, so I say goodnight again and begin to walk away. She simply says my name, John. It is enough to get me to turn around, since it is the only word she has said in the 5 minutes since we had left the car. But that's all I get. I again try to get her to say something else. Eventually I get to the point where I'm about to leave again. Again she says, John. This time I turn around, but I don't walk back to her. So she walks to me in the middle of the parking lot. So we're standing there, and she still doesn't have anything to say. Do not ask me what the hell I was thinking, because I don't even know. I say to her, what do you want from me? There are 3 things that can happen. We can either both go up and talk about what the hell your problem is. I can just leave, or you can come with me and we'll go get breakfast or something. What? Yeah, that was totally stupid. Then again, I am a man and she was my strapless evening gown wearing date that spent the whole evening dancing with lesbians. Of course I get nothing. So I decide that she is coming with me to go get breakfast, because it is now almost 5:45 a.m., and she implicitly agrees as she walks with me to the passenger door of the car. I open it, but she will not get in. So I close the door and tell her again that I'm leaving. As I walk to the driver's side of the car, she follows me there, still not speaking. Now I'm asking her what she wants from me. At one point she again takes out her keys and remotely starts up her car for some reason. I'm asking her why she won't speak, why she won't just go up to her apartment, why she keeps saying my name. Nothing. I twice more tell her again I'm leaving, and on both occasions I turn around to open the car door. She says, "John." After this second time I tell her that I have no idea what is going on, but if she had something to say she had better say it. I told her that I was leaving right then, and that simply saying my name would not be enough to keep me from driving away. Since I got no response, I turned around and opened the driver's door again. This time, instead of saying my name, she balls up her fists and starts punching me in the back of the head. With both fists. As hard as she fucking can. So now I'm freaking out. I get popped a couple times in the ear and cheekbone as I turn before I grab her wrists and pin her down on an adjacent car. "What the hell is wrong with you?" and "calm down" are the only things I really say before I realize that I need to just get the hell out of there. I have a girl pinned on a car in the middle of the night in a parking lot. So I release her to get myself into the car, and the punching begins again. So now I am trying to deflect her wild punches and open the car door while she is punching and trying to keep the door closed. I eventually have to put my weight behind a really hard push to get her far enough away from me to allow for a lightning quick maneuver into the car. I think she must be a fucking ninja because she doesn't fall down. She almost immediately regains her balance and begins to punch the driver's window of the car. This continues until I am clear of her and drive away. To this day we still know some of the same people, but thankfully I never heard from her again. Bucharest, 2017. A city alive with old-world charm and electric energy. I was there for a week, soaking in the culture, the history, the cobblestone streets that seemed to echo whispers from the past. It was the kind of place where anything felt possible, romance, adventure, even danger. And that's where I met her. Her name was Alina. We matched on Tinder late one night while I sat in a dimly lit cafe, sipping something strong and unfamiliar. Her photos were captivating, dark, striking eyes, a mischievous smile that felt like it held secrets. She messaged me first. Confident, witty. It didn't take long before we'd arranged to meet for dinner. That night, I arrived at the restaurant a little early. It was a cozy, intimate place tucked away in one of the quieter corners of the city. Warm light spilled from the windows, painting golden pools on the cobblestones. As I stepped inside, the low murmur of voices and clinking glasses wrapped around me like a blanket. And there she was, waiting for me at a table near the back. Alina looked even more stunning in person. Her dress hugged her figure just enough to turn heads, but it was her presence that commanded attention. She stood as I approached, her smile magnetic, her handshake firm but warm. "I was starting to think you'd stood me up," she teased, her voice low and velvety. "Not a chance," I replied, though my stomach fluttered. We settled into the evening easily, or so it seemed. Conversation flowed, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. At first, I chalked it up to nerves. She was captivating, after all, and I was just some guy passing through a city where she probably had her pick of admirers. But as the night wore on, the unease grew. It wasn't her words. Those were charming, even clever. It wasn't her demeanor, either. She laughed in all the right places, asked thoughtful questions, and leaned in just enough to make it feel like I was the only man in the room. No, it wasn't anything she did. It was something deeper. A gut feeling. A prickle at the back of my neck. Like I was being watched. Or hunted. By the time the plates were cleared and the wine glasses were drained, I was ready to call it a night. "This was nice," I said, leaning back in my chair. "But I should probably head back. Early morning tomorrow." Her smile faltered, just for a moment. So brief I almost missed it. "Come on," she said, her voice soft but insistent. "The night's still young. Let's go back to my place. Just one more drink." It wasn't the first time I'd been invited back to someone's place. Usually I didn't hesitate. But tonight, the pit in my stomach twisted tighter, a visceral warning I couldn't ignore. I smiled politely, trying to soften the blow. "I really appreciate the offer, but I should get some rest." Her eyes darkened, the playful spark in them dimming. She sat back in her chair, her expression unreadable. For a moment, I thought she'd let it go, and then it happened. The movement was so quick, so sudden, that I barely registered it at first. One moment, she was sitting there, her face a mask of cool indifference. The next, her hand darted out, grabbing the steak knife from the table. I didn't have time to react. I didn't even see it coming. The blade sank into my stomach with a sickening, surreal pressure. There was no immediate pain, just a rush of confusion, a blur of movement as she pulled back, the knife still clutched in her hand. Time slowed. The room tilted. I stared down at the growing red stain on my shirt, my brain struggling to process what had just happened. She stabbed me. She actually stabbed me. The shock broke first. "What the?" I gasped, pushing back from the table, my chair scraping against the floor. My legs wobbled as I stood, one hand clutching my abdomen, the other gripping the edge of the table for balance. The pain hit then, sharp and deep, radiating through my torso like fire. Alina stood too, the knife still in her hand, her face unreadable. She didn't look angry or panicked, just calm, detached, like this was nothing more than a calculated move in some game I didn't understand. "You should have come home with me," she said, her voice eerily steady. Adrenaline surged, dulling the pain as survival instinct kicked in. I staggered backward, bumping into a nearby table. The other diners were staring now, their faces frozen in shock and horror. Someone screamed. A man jumped to his feet, shouting something in Romanian. "Help me!" I managed to choke out, blood trickling from the corner of my mouth. My legs buckled, but I caught myself on the edge of another table. The restaurant erupted into chaos. Chairs scraped, glasses shattered, and voices overlapped in frantic confusion. Alina didn't move, her dark eyes locked on me, as if she were waiting for something. Waiting for me to fall. I wasn't going to give her that satisfaction. Somehow, I made it to the door. Hands grabbed at me, waiters, other patrons, their voices a blur of questions and shouts. I stumbled into the cold night air, the chill biting at my sweat-soaked skin. The pain was unbearable now, each step a jagged spike of agony radiating through my body. A cab was idling at the curb, the driver oblivious to the chaos spilling out behind me. I practically fell into the back seat, gasping out the name of the nearest hospital. The driver turned, his eyes widening when he saw the blood, but he didn't hesitate. The car lurched forward, the tires screeching as we sped through the narrow streets. The hospital was a blur of white lights and frantic voices. I was rushed into surgery, the world fading in and out as I drifted on the edge of consciousness. When I woke up, the police were waiting. I told them everything, the dinner, the knife, Alina. They listened, their faces grim. When I finished, one of the officers exchanged a look with his partner before turning back to me. "She's done this before," he said quietly. My blood ran cold. In the days that followed, I learned bits and pieces of the truth. Alina wasn't just some woman looking for a casual date. She had a history, a dark, violent past that no dating profile could ever reveal. I was lucky, they told me. Luckier than most. Even now, years later, I can still see her face in my nightmares. That calm, detached expression, the glint of the knife in her hand, the way she watched me bleed, as if I were nothing more than a fleeting inconvenience. Bucharest, 2017. A city alive with charm and danger. I'll never forget it. We'd matched a week earlier. His name was Ryan. Clean-cut, quick-witted, and charming in a way that seemed effortless. He had a smile that could disarm you and an easy confidence that made you want to trust him. Maybe that was the problem. The date itself was fine, dinner at a small Italian restaurant. He was attentive, asked all the right questions, and kept the conversation light and engaging. If there were any red flags, I missed them entirely. By the time he offered to drive me home, I felt relaxed. Safe. I should have known better. It started with a rolling stop. We'd barely made it 2 blocks when he slid through a stop sign without even pretending to slow down. My brow furrowed, but I didn't say anything. Maybe he didn't see it. Maybe it was just an honest mistake. But then, a few minutes later, he took a left turn where a large, glaring sign clearly read "No left turn." My unease deepened as I glanced at him. "Ryan," I said hesitantly. "I think that was illegal." He chuckled, brushing it off like it was no big deal. "It's fine. Nobody's out here this late." As if on cue, flashing red and blue lights lit up the rearview mirror, accompanied by the wail of a siren. My stomach dropped. He cursed under his breath, tightening his grip on the steering wheel. "Pull over," I said, my voice a mix of urgency and disbelief. He didn't. Instead, he muttered, "I can't do this right now," and slammed his foot on the gas. The car lurched forward, pinning me against the seat as we sped down the empty street. My heart was in my throat, panic clawing at my chest. "What are you doing?" I shouted, gripping the door handle as if it might somehow save me. "I just need to lose them." he said, his voice steady in a way that terrified me even more. It'll be fine. Trust me. Trust him. Trust him. The man who'd just turned a routine traffic stop into a car chase? My head spun as I tried to process what was happening. The sirens grew louder, the flashing lights brighter, as the police car closed in behind us. Ryan, this is insane. Stop the car. I begged, but he was too focused on the road, his jaw clenched, his knuckles white on the wheel. He made a sharp turn onto a residential street, the tires screeching beneath us. Houses blurred past as he scanned for somewhere to hide. Finally, he veered into a random driveway, killing the engine and plunging us into silence. Stay quiet, he whispered, as if this were some kind of spy movie and not a life-altering disaster unfolding in real time. I sat frozen, my pulse pounding in my ears, as the police car slowed at the end of the street. For a brief, agonizing moment, I thought they might pass us by. But then the car stopped. The lights cut off, and the officers got out. The next few minutes were a chaotic blur. The police approached the car with weapons drawn, shouting commands I could barely process through the fog of panic. Hands where we can see them. Both of you, out of the vehicle, now. My hands trembled as I fumbled with the seatbelt, my mind racing. I wasn't even sure if I could stand. My legs felt like jelly. Ryan stepped out first, his movements slow and deliberate, as if this was all just a minor inconvenience. It's not what it looks like, he said calmly, raising his hands. But it was exactly what it looked like. And worse. I followed him out, my hands shaking as I lifted them above my head. The officers moved quickly, barking orders, their flashlights blinding in the darkness. Before I knew it, I was in handcuffs, the cold metal biting into my wrists. Wait! I stammered, my voice cracking. I didn't do anything. I don't even know what's going on. The officers weren't interested in my protests. They marched us to the curb, sat us down, and began searching the car. Ryan was eerily quiet, his expression unreadable. Meanwhile, my mind raced with questions and fears. How had this gone so wrong? Who was this man? And why, in the name of all that was sane, had I agreed to get in his car? It didn't take long for the truth to come out. One of the officers emerged from the car, holding a radio in one hand and a file in the other. His expression was grim. "This car's stolen," he announced, his voice flat and matter-of-fact. My stomach dropped. I stared at Ryan, horrified, but he didn't even flinch. "And he's got outstanding warrants," the officer continued, glancing down at the file. "We'll need to extradite him." I could barely breathe. Stolen car? Warrants? What kind of person had I just spent the evening with? The officers pulled Ryan to his feet, reading him his rights as they led him to the patrol car. He didn't look back. Not once. As for me, they removed the handcuffs but didn't let me go. Not right away. They asked me questions, how I knew him, what I knew about the car, whether I was involved in any of his crimes. I answered as best I could, trying to keep my voice steady despite the tears threatening to spill over. Eventually they believed me. They offered me a ride home, and though the thought of getting into another car, any car, made my skin crawl, I didn't have much choice. The ride was silent, except for the officer driving. "You're lucky," he said after a long pause. "Guys like that, they don't usually stop at traffic violations. Could have been worse." I nodded numbly, staring out the window as the city blurred past. Lucky? I didn't feel lucky. I felt shaken, exposed, and deeply, profoundly stupid. How had I missed the signs? Or were there even signs to miss? When we finally pulled up to my apartment, I thanked the officer quietly and slipped inside. The moment the door closed behind me, I sank to the floor, my entire body trembling. I never saw Ryan again. From what the police told me, he was extradited to another state the following week. His outstanding warrants included everything from grand theft auto to fraud. Sometimes, late at night, I think about that drive, about the look on his face as the sirens closed in, about the calm way he'd said, "Trust me," as if trust could ever survive something like that. And I think about how close I came to becoming a footnote in his story, another casualty of his recklessness. It was a lesson I wouldn't forget. Sometimes, danger doesn't come with warning signs. Sometimes, it comes with a charming smile and an offer to drive you home. I matched with her on Tinder a week ago. Julia. She was the kind of girl who'd turn heads back in high school. A magnetic smile, wild laughter that made you feel like you were the only one in on the joke. We'd never spoken much back then, but when her profile popped up, I couldn't swipe right fast enough. Her message came almost immediately. "Dinner at my place next Friday?" I make a killer lasagna. I wasn't one to turn down a home-cooked meal, especially not when it came with the possibility of rekindling some teenage fantasies. So there I was, pulling up to her place, an unassuming house in a quiet suburb, armed with a bottle of cheap wine and a half-decent button-up shirt. Butterflies swirled in my stomach as I knocked on the door. When she opened it, she looked even better than her pictures. Casual but alluring, her hair pulled into a loose ponytail, lips painted crimson. "Glad you made it," she said, her voice warm, inviting. "Come in." The smell of lasagna wafted through the air, mingling with the subtle vanilla scent of her perfume. I stepped into her living room, my eyes darting around. Cozy, clean, filled with personal touches, framed photos, mismatched throw pillows. Then I saw the kid, a tiny human parked on the couch, watching cartoons, completely unfazed by my presence. "Oh, this is Benji," Julia said with a shrug, as if she'd forgotten to mention the small fact of her motherhood. "He's 7. Cool with kids." I stammered out something vaguely agreeable. Kids were fine, I told myself, in small doses. Dinner was surprisingly good. Julia was charming, witty, every bit the girl I'd fantasized about back in school. Benji piped in occasionally, asking questions about my car or whether I could do a backflip. The whole scene was strangely domestic, but there was an energy between Julia and me, an unspoken tension crackling just beneath the surface. As the night wore on and Benji was shuffled off to bed, Julia's demeanor shifted. Her smile lingered longer, her touches grew bolder. "Want to head upstairs?" she asked, her voice a low purr. I followed her without hesitation. Her bedroom was dimly lit, the faint glow of candles casting flickering shadows on the walls. I barely had time to take it in before she was pulling me close, her lips on mine, hands exploring. The world outside faded, reduced to nothing but the heat between us. Then, somewhere in the distance, a sound. A faint, unmistakable noise that sliced through the moment like a knife. The slam of a car door. Julia froze. Her eyes widened, panic flickering across her face. "Shit," she whispered, scrambling to her feet. "He's home." I blinked, my brain sluggish to catch up. "Who's home?" "My husband," she hissed, grabbing at her clothes. "You have to go." "Husband?" The word hit me like a bucket of ice water. Adrenaline surged as I realized the gravity of the situation. "What the hell, Julia?" I whispered harshly, fumbling for my jeans. They were nowhere to be found. "Just get out," she urged, shoving my shirt into my hands. "Window go." I glanced at the window. 2 stories up, a sheer drop onto what looked like a rosebush-covered lawn. "You can't be serious." Footsteps echoed from downstairs, heavy, deliberate. Julia's panic was contagious now, coursing through me like an electric shock. There wasn't time to argue. Heart pounding, I pushed open the window, cold air hitting my skin like a slap. "Go," she hissed again, shoving me toward the ledge. I swung one leg over, then the other, muttering a stream of curses under my breath. Below me, the yard stretched out like a dark abyss. I had no plan, no dignity, and absolutely no time. I jumped. The landing was less than graceful. Thorns tore at my bare legs as I tumbled into the bushes, biting back a scream. Pain radiated from my shoulder, but there was no time to assess the damage. Somewhere inside, I could hear voices, Julia's husband, confused, demanding answers. "Thought you said you were working late," I heard her say, her voice strained but steady. A masterclass in damage control. I scrambled to my feet, adrenaline dulling the pain. Barefoot, shirtless, and in nothing but my boxers, I bolted across the yard. The cold ground stung my feet as I sprinted for the safety of my car, parked a block away. Behind me, a light flicked on. I didn't look back to see if anyone was watching. I didn't want to know. When I finally reached my car, I collapsed into the driver's seat, lungs burning, heart hammering like a drum. My hands shook as I fumbled for the keys, glancing around to make sure no one had followed me. The neighborhood was eerily quiet, the kind of silence that feels oppressive, suffocating. I sat there for a moment, trying to process what had just happened. My shoulder throbbed, and I noticed for the first time that my boxers were shredded, tiny red scratches crisscrossing my thighs. What the hell is wrong with people? I muttered to no one. The absurdity of it all hit me then. The lasagna, the kid, the husband, the damn rosebush. A hysterical laugh bubbled up in my chest, spilling out before I could stop it. I was half naked, bruised, and bleeding in the middle of suburbia, and all I could do was laugh. The drive home was a blur. By the time I stumbled into my apartment, the adrenaline was wearing off, leaving behind a dull ache and a bone-deep exhaustion. I collapsed onto the couch, staring at the ceiling, replaying the night over and over in my head. The audacity of it, the betrayal, the sheer, chaotic absurdity. Part of me wanted to text Julia, demand answers, call her out on her lies. But what would be the point? She wasn't the girl I thought she was, and I sure as hell wasn't about to be her collateral damage. I dodged a bullet tonight, barely. And as I lay there, staring at the ceiling, I made a silent vow. No more Tinder, no more lasagna, and absolutely no more married women. When I first matched with her on the app, it felt promising. Let's call her Emily. She had this bright, disarming smile in her pictures, one that felt both genuine and intriguing. Our initial conversation was effortless, filled with humor and just the right amount of flirtation. It was rare to find that kind of spark online, but sparks can be misleading. By the end of our first evening texting, I felt hopeful. Emily was sharp, funny, and seemed down to earth. We traded banter, talked about favorite movies, and even shared playlists. For once, it felt like this wasn't going to be another dead-end match. I was wrong. On day 3, her messages began to shift. It wasn't gradual. It was like turning a page in a book and realizing you're suddenly in a completely different story. Out of nowhere, Emily started sharing deeply personal details about her life. She talked about therapy sessions, past betrayals, and family issues, painting a picture of someone who had clearly been through a lot. Now, don't get me wrong, I didn't mind that she'd opened up. Vulnerability isn't a bad thing, but this felt abrupt, almost out of context. Just 2 days earlier, we'd been laughing about bad karaoke experiences, and now we were diving headfirst into her emotional scars. It was jarring. I listened as best I could, sending supportive responses, though I didn't feel we'd earned that level of intimacy yet. Trust takes time, and I wasn't ready to carry someone else's weight, not when I barely knew them. Still, I figured it was just a moment. She'd recalibrate, right? I hoped. By day 5, the universe had other plans for me. That morning, I saw something my ex posted online. It wasn't anything dramatic, a photo, a casual caption, but it hit me harder than I cared to admit. Grief isn't linear, and heartbreak doesn't keep to a schedule. It gutted me. Suddenly, every ounce of energy I had drained out of me. I wasn't angry or bitter, just hollow. I wasn't ready to talk to anyone that day, least of all Emily, someone I barely knew. When her text popped up mid-morning, cheerfully asking how my day was going, I stared at my phone for a moment before replying. I needed space, I told her. I explained it kindly, honestly, or at least I thought I had. I figured she'd understand. Minutes passed. Then an hour. No reply. I assumed she'd taken it in stride. I set my phone down, crawled into bed, and let the world slip away for a little while. When I picked up my phone a few hours later, everything had changed. For missed calls, 9 unread texts. My stomach sank as I scrolled through the notifications, each one heavier than the last. The texts weren't the light-hearted kind, the hope you're okay messages a friend might send. No, these were diatribes, paragraphs filled with frustration, accusation, and melodrama. This always happens to me, she wrote. Every time I open up to someone, they push me away. I thought you were different. The words felt less like a plea for understanding and more like a hammer of guilt, wielded with precision. I was apparently revealing my true colors. Her tone was relentless, painting herself as the victim of yet another failed connection, and me as the perpetrator of some imagined cruelty. I didn't know how to respond, or if I even wanted to. I barely knew this woman, yet she was demanding an explanation, an apology, as if I owed her something. I didn't. Not after 5 days of texting. Not after what was, at best, a passing connection. I let the messages sit there, unanswered. The next morning, I sent her one final text. I kept it brief and polite, though every word felt like walking a tightrope. I told her this wasn't going to work out, and wished her the best. Then, without waiting for a response, I blocked her number. It wasn't a decision I made lightly. Blocking someone felt extreme, but Emily had shown her hand. Her reaction wasn't just intense, it was a red flag the size of a billboard. I realized I wasn't ready to date anyway. Maybe it was a blessing in disguise, a favor she'd unwittingly done for me by showing me what I wasn't ready to handle. For weeks, I thought about her only in passing. Occasionally, I'd remember her words and feel a pang of discomfort, but mostly I moved on. My focus shifted inward. Time spent healing, reflecting, rediscovering what I wanted and needed. Slowly, I felt like myself again. And then last night, she found me. I was scrolling through Facebook, mindlessly liking photos of old classmates and distant cousins, when the notification popped up. A friend request from her. My heart skipped a beat. Emily. Her profile picture was unmistakable, that same bright, disarming smile. But how? I had never given her my last name. We hadn't exchanged social media handles, or even mentioned mutual friends. Yet there she was, finding me in the vast, endless expanse of the internet. It was unsettling, to say the least. For a moment, I stared at the screen, unsure of what to do. My thumb hovered over the delete request button, but curiosity nagged at me. How had she tracked me down? Was this some kind of coincidence, or had she gone digging for information? I clicked her profile, scrolling through her posts and photos. It was a strange feeling, seeing someone's curated life after you'd glimpsed the raw, unfiltered version of them. Her timeline was cheerful, polished, filled with inspirational quotes and selfies. If you didn't know better, you'd think she was just another happy, well-adjusted person. But I knew better. I deleted the request without hesitation. Whatever Emily was looking for, it wasn't something I could give her. Whether she was seeking closure or rekindling whatever connection she thought we'd had, I wanted no part of it. That chapter of my life, brief, chaotic, and bewildering as it was, needed to stay closed. As I sat there, staring at the empty notification tab, a strange mix of emotions washed over me. Relief, mostly, but also a lingering unease. Emily had been a lesson, one I hadn't expected but desperately needed. Trust takes time, and not every spark is worth chasing. I powered down my phone, set it aside, and took a deep breath. The world felt quieter, safer without her presence looming in my digital periphery. It was over now, for good this time. Or at least, I hoped it was. I've been on 2 blind dates. One ended with me getting hot tea poured deliberately into my lap, and the other one was a fucking disaster. Several years ago, I went through a period of pretty low self-esteem. I had just gotten out of the military and had a 5-year-long relationship end on bad terms. I was adrift in life, and women could smell it on me. It was like I had a phantasmal neon sign above my head that read, mid-20s male. Brash, annoying, desperate, clingy. There was no love out there for your faithful scribe. I did what every idiot does at that point, which was to convince myself that if I could just get the right girl, everything would look up. The ladies were not so enthusiastic about my cart before the hoarseness. I turned to eHarmony to remedy this unfortunate situation. After the month-long vetting process, I finally arranged a date. The girl was a Mary Kay salesperson, makeup ladies are hot, right? And seemed to be about where I was in life. I drove over to her apartment to take her to dinner, visions of meeting my future wife playing in my head. I just knew that this would be the one. We were going to become a team and pull each other out of our collective funks, building each other's self-esteem. Together, we were going to conquer the world. I pulled up outside her building. She didn't give me her actual apartment number for PERSEC reasons, in the rain, and called her. After she said she was coming out, I began watching for her. I am a gentleman and always open the door for a lady, but I wanted to stay in my warm, dry truck as long as possible. After several false alarms, I heard a knock on my passenger side door. My finely tuned jungle sense had somehow missed the future love of my life walking across the parking lot. I sprung into action, much chagrined. Had I messed up her first impression already? I hopped out and went around to the passenger side door. The creature I beheld was nothing like the one that had danced in my mind on the trip over. There were no long, lean thighs. There was no feminine jawline, no perfect, but tastefully concealed, bosom pushing through a sheer, but tasteful, you see, blouse. Absent were soulful, but glinting with subtle mischief. Eyes. I was looking at a human tub of shit. This poor girl had let herself go to the point of repulsiveness. She had 2.5 chins, a ponus that hung to her knock-knees, and tiny, beady eyes that were permanently squinting due to the oppressive weight of facial fat. Dear reader, I believe I actually took several steps back. Hi, Savage Henry. I'm so excited to meet you. Where are we going to eat? My mind raced. I had reservations at a 5-star restaurant. I was prepared to invest $300 or $400 on dinner with the vision in my head. There is no sense skimping on the woman who was to be my salvation, I had reasoned. But this? Hell no. I figured we could head over to the Macaroni Grill. They have pretty good food, I guess. Quick thinking, right? Smooth too. Not smooth or quick enough to back out of this date, though. I was bullied into opening the truck door by social convention, and my inability to be a total asshole to an obese girl. Have you ever seen films of the paratroopers getting on planes prior to jumping into Normandy? Burdened by 100 pounds of gear and parachute, those brave men struggled up the ladders into DC-3s, teetering on the threshold until they got a helpful shove from the man behind them. Watching this woman get into my truck was quite similar. She huffed and puffed, quivered and jiggled, and finally slopped herself into the passenger's seat. My huge Dodge truck with a 3/4-ton suspension groaned. When I got back on my side, I swear my truck had a 10-degree list to starboard. Walking into the restaurant with her, I was as embarrassed as I have been since a very unfortunate incident in 4th grade. The men cast pitying looks at me, and the women were not much better. The servers looked at her greedily, knowing there was economic opportunity in a woman who obviously ate so much. Dinner conversation was uncomfortable, until I struck upon an idea. I asked about her past relationships. If I wasn't going to get to know the future Mrs. Savage Henry, I could at least do anthropological research into the kind of man who sought a woman such as this. She was emboldened by my seeming interest in her. "Oh, I don't date a lot. I was seeing this guy for a while, but he cheated on me and gave me an STD." "Oh, an STD? So what did you get?" Like she had won a raffle or grab bag or something. "I have genital warts. Don't worry, though. I get them frozen off, and you won't catch anything. We can still have sex. I hope we do have sex later. I'm having a really good time with you. I promise it will be great." The last part was said with what I assume was a conspiratorial wink, but it looked like some adipose-triggered facial tic. "Okay," I said. That was the final blow for me. At that point in my life, I might have sunk so low as to use this poor creature for sex, but the thought of warts on my unit put the kibosh on that. We sped through dinner, her surely thinking I was excited by the promise of wading through folds of Limburger-scented chub in search of her diseased lady parts, and me wishing for an ejection seat instead of a booth. When we pulled up in front of her apartment building after dinner, I made the usual excuses about being tired and having to work early in the morning. "You'll call me, right?" I envisioned her very own phantasmal neon sign spinning over her head. It read female mid-20s. Fat, boring, desperate, and a permanent fucking STD. I went home, deleted her number, and drank half a bottle of Jack.